Alright, welcome everyone. Welcome to another session for your week 3. So in the previous lecture we went through lesson 5, which was focus on the budget, and now we're moving into lesson number 6. So lesson 6 focus on recording transactions in the general ledger module. So in this what we're going to do is we are going to go through a process of how to record transactions in the general ledger module. So now when you complete in lesson 6, I'm not going to complete every single transaction that are done in lesson 6. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna make up some transactions, and I'll record that as we go through the lecture today. And those are the examples that I'm going to do it myself, but it will be quite different what you see in the test book. So when you're listening to the lecture, don't follow these instructions. You guys will be completing the exercises exactly what it tells you in the test book. Okay, the whole purpose for me to do a lesson 6 is for you to understand how do you record transactions in the general ledger transaction, how do you record them, how do you post them, and what are the different ways you can edit the batches before you post. And once the transactions are posted, how do you print the posting journal report. And then once the post that is done, also go through a process of how you can export a batch and import a batch in Sage 300 as well. And once we done all of that, we are going to go through a process of how you create a recurring transaction, and we'll understand the process for that. And then lastly we're going to look at the allocation batch as well. What is the purpose of doing an allocation batch, and how do we process an allocation batch as well. Okay, so I'm going to explain those things, and in my way, once you finish listening to the lecture, after you close the lecture, then I want you to go back to your test book and then follow the process. That book tells you to complete all the exercises from 6.1 all the way to 6.14. So there's 14 exercises, and you have to do all of them using the instructions that are provided in the test book. Now for me to get started with lesson 6, there's two ways as well. One, if you're working on your computer, you can use your file, complete it, and once that is done, then you start your work from exercise 6.1. There's something wrong with this. Okay, so now that's one. If you're working on the app stream, you're going to do the same thing we did previously. Now we are going to do is we can use end of lesson 5 to start lesson 6. So end of lesson 5 is available on the Blackboard as well. So you go on the Blackboard. So let's go on your Blackboard, and we can download end of lesson 5, and it is downloaded on my C drive on download folder. The second step is I'm going to upload that. Say I'm already logged in, so I'm sure now by this time you know how to log into your app stream. Once you log in, you can either continue from lesson 5. If you don't want to close it, you can continue from lesson 5. Then you don't have to worry about uploading the end of lesson 5. Once you finish for all the exercises from 5, then you continue from 6.1 right after that. So because I close the session, now I need the end of lesson 5. So I'm going to upload the file, which is end of lesson 5. That's done. The next step is I'm going to unzip this, extract. That's done. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a database load, and I will load it to end of lesson 5, and I'll load this one to OmniDAD. I'll load OmniSys with OmniSys, and then click finish. Once it's done, I'll open Sage 300 click on only that. And the session date again is, now the session date changed from January 1st to January 31st 2021. So maybe we'll be moving to the end of the month, because now we're going to start recording transactions. So now you see that we created a monthly reminder in chapter 1. So this was supposed to run 3 days before the month end, which is January 31st. Because now the session date is January 31st, it gives you this reminder. So we close it, and then we have access to the application. So now for us, very first thing, change the company name. So add your name at the end, and add your name right here as well. Save. Okay. Once this is done, now what you're going to do is you are going to focus on the GL transactions. So lesson 6, you are focused on the GL transactions. Okay. So first thing I wanted to explain to you is I want you guys to see how we record transactions. Okay. So in the next couple of weeks, what we're going to do is we're going to learn accounts payable and account receivable module as well. But for now, we're only going to focus on general ledger. So we assume that the company is not using AP or AR module. They are only using the GL batch. So in GL batch, we can still do the full bookkeeping without we need an AP or AR module. But the process is going to be manual. Every time there is a sales transaction, we're going to record the sales by debiting account receivable, crediting sales, and crediting the GST HST account. Every time we make a purchase, we're going to debit the purchases, debit the GST HST, credit the bank account, or credit the accounts payable, depending on it's on cash or credit. So that means that we can still do the bookkeeping, do the journal entries, then the ledger will be created, the financial statements will be printed. But the process will be a little bit more lengthy. Okay, but if we have less volume of transactions, maybe we can use that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to assume that in January we don't have the AP or AR module. We're going to record all these transactions using journal ledger module. So now to record that, similar to what we did in lesson 4, is we post the transaction using the batches. So we go into the batch list, and here we create a new batch, and this one we're going to call this January sales, January 2021 sales. So we will name this batch that this is the batch for recording all the sales. And now we are in batch number 2. You can have as many entries as you want. Okay, for example, we're gonna say sales, and the first sale we have is we will just pick up a random customer, and we're gonna say ABC Electricals. Okay, again, this is not what is in the test book. You guys will do what's being asked in the test book, but this is just to make up transactions. And then we're going to mention when was the sales date. So this sales happened on January 12, and then the source code. The key thing is you want to allocate the appropriate source code. So this is a credit sales, so we will book them as a sales, and then we're going to have to enter the transaction saying I made a sale for $1,000 plus the GST HST. So I'm going to debit the sale. I'm going to credit the sales account for 1,000, and this was for the 100 department. Credit 1,000, and go to the next line. And this is the name. There's a couple of emails I received in regards to asking me that they cannot enter the information to the next line. And I have said that many times before. I'm going to say it again. If you cannot go to the next line, press the insert button, and that will take you to the next line, and then you enter the information in the next line. So here the credit is a GST HST on sales. So we select the GST HST on sales, which is GST HST payable, and that's 13%, which is $130. And what are we going to debit is account receivable. So I press insert again. Then here I'm gonna pull up the account receivable account, which is right here, and I'm going to debit that with $1,130. $30. Okay, now you see that your entry balance, and if you have the invoice number, you can put the customer name and the invoice number together, so that way everything is in one place. And then we click add. Okay, then we record another sale, and I'm gonna have this one goes to the just call this okay, so I'm gonna call this Deconstruction Inc. Invoice number 102. So Omni rented a machine to the construction company, invoice 102, and that was for $300 plus HST. So we again select the sales as a source code. This happened on 31st of January, so we leave it as it is. And now we're going to select the account, sales account. Now this is sales account is for 200 division, that's machinery division, and the sale happened for 300. Press insert to go to the next line, then you select the account, which is a GST HST payable, and that's $39, and then press insert, and that is account receivable account, and that's 339. Okay, so that's done. And then you click add. Okay, you keep adding as many sales that happened during the month. Okay, so for example, I only have 2 sales, but when you guys will do that, you have more sales to record. You keep recording the way that you're recording it right here. Okay, once the sales are recorded, I close that. So now what you see there's a batch number 2, and this is a description of the batch, and then you scroll down, the status for that is entered. That means it's only entered, and you see the total amount for the batch, and then how many entries are in the batch is 2. Okay, you see all that information in this column. Okay, now you say, you know what, we're going to record more transaction, but those are the purchases. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new batch, and that batch we're going to call this is January 2021 AP payments. Okay, so I'm going to record the payments now. Okay, so then the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to call this rent payment. Okay, and this happened on January 15, and I pick up the source code, which was the disbursement for the payment. So you pick up the most relevant source code, and then the entry for the rent was I'm paying rent for $500 plus the HST. So I'm going to find my rent expense account, that's strange, I don't have rent account. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to book the rent to the office expenses. Well, let's just change the scenario. We say we paid telephone expenses. Okay, so we're going to book the telephone expense for $600 plus HST. Okay, so we're going to change this. We're going to, instead of rent, we're going to say this was the telephone expense. Okay, and then we're going to book the amount, debit 600, and then we're also going to debit the GST account as well. So this was GST recoverable. So 600 times 13% is $78. Let's just double check. 600 times 113, $78, and then credit to the bank account because this is a cash payment. Bank account was at the very top. Credit the bank account for $678, and we click add. Okay, then we're going to do another entry. Then we're going to do is we're going to book that to the Okay, so we're gonna select the disbursement account. That's another payment, and I want to see what other expense account we have. Okay, we have insurance. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a payment for insurance. Okay, so we paid insurance expenses for $100 plus HST, and that happened on 31st. And to do that, we're going to debit insurance expenses. And that's 100. And there is no HST on the insurance. So what we do is, because the HST is embedded, which is the PST, so we said it is not recoverable, so we just book the full 108 to the insurance expense account. And again, those information will be given to you when you are given a transaction. So you credit the bank account for 108 as well. And then we're going to record one more payment, and then we'll go close the batch. So next payment you happen is you paid the utilities. You paid the utilities for $500 plus HST. You paid it on 31st of January, and again this is the disbursement as well. So we do a disbursement, and the debit is utilities expenses. So it's utilities expense right here, and this was 500 debit, and you're going to debit the GST HST recoverable as well, which is 13% of 500 is $65, and you're going to credit the bank account with 565. Okay, we're done with the entry. Okay, so we did 3 entries for as a payment. Okay, and we close that. So now what we have is we have 2 batches. They're ready to post, but their type is right now status is open and the type is entered. So now now this is how you create batches. Okay, it doesn't matter what entry you have, you will be given the numbers. You still need to use your accounting knowledge to come up with what account need to be debited, what account need to be credited. Based on that, you will do the journal entry. Once you complete the journal entries, you record them, separate them based on the classification of the transactions. Sales transaction you book in a separate batch, payment transaction you book in a separate batch. If you have deposits coming in, you create another different batch. You save them in the separate batches. You can keep it in the same batch as well, but the best practice is you separate the batches based on the nature of the transactions. So now you guys know how to enter the transactions. Now I'm going to show you guys what you need to do to post the batches. So now if the batch is open, you can do whatever you want with the batch. You say, you know what, I made so many mistakes in this batch. Instead of me correcting, it's better for me to just delete the batch and re-enter it. Okay, that's how you can simply select it and click delete, and it will delete the batch. Okay, if you want to change the entry, you can always open the batch and then make the changes to whatever entries you want. So there's entry 1, there's entry 2. You can change the amount, GL account, whatever you want, you can do that. Okay, and if you're ready, your manager approved it. Once they are approved, you can say ready to post, say yes and yes. Okay, and then somebody who wants to post it, you can say click post. So if you click post here, it only posts the batch that's selected. If you click post all, anywhere you see yes, it will post all those batches. So that's how you post a batch. Now before I post, I want to show you something else as well. That's very important, and it's very good information for you to keep it, that you can keep it for your knowledge as well. So if you have certain transactions and you know that those transactions are going to happen every month. For example, this AP payments that we did. Okay, telephone expenses is going to happen every month. Insurance expense is going to happen every month. Utilities are going to happen every month. So for me, every month I have to record these transactions. Most likely the amounts are fixed as well. Okay, so why don't I just copy this batch, and then every month I can use this batch and import it, and then use the batch. If the amount changes, you change the amount and then you post them. So it will save a lot of time, right? Here we're talking about 3 transactions. Think about if you have 20 transactions, that's same transactions every month. So in that case, what you can do is you can do file, import. Okay, so first you actually export it. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to export this batch. Okay, and it's going to ask you which file that you want to export into. We can say Excel, browse, file, so first you're going to export. Okay, so let me see if we can export a batch without, I think it has to be done before posting it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go file and click export. And you're going to give a location, and we're going to say we'll just do a temporary folder, and here we can call this monthly payment. Okay, and then press OK. So now this batch has been exported. Now what we're going to do is we're going to post these batch. Okay, so I just imported so that we have that I can use in the next month. Okay, so now that batch has been exported, and we import that when we need to record transactions for the month of February. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to post the batches. So now I'm going to say this ready to post to yes and yes, and instead of me clicking post for every single one, I will simply say post all. So now when I click post all, it will post all these transactions. And now you can close it. Now you go into the batch list again, and you see that the batch status changed from open to posted. Okay, now if I ask you to print the GL reports, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to print the posting journals. You see the posting journal right here. Every time I'm going to ask you to print the posting journal. So when you post a batch, always remember what the posting sequence number was. So when we go into a GL transaction, you'll see a sequence number at the very end. See a sequence number 2 and 2. So that means the same sequence number assigned for both the batches. So when you post them together, it assigns the same sequence number. So go into a GL reports, go into posting journal, and now before I do that, I have to change the print destination to preview, paper size, orientation, and A4. Now I'm going to go into posting journal. I only wanted to see sequence number 2, and I click print. I see batch number 2 here, batch number 3 as well. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to save this. So I click export, PDF, OK again, and I'm going to name this is lesson 6 posting journal. Now that report is saved. So now that batch is posted, and I saved the reports. Now if I ask you to give me those reports, you simply go in and submit that PDF report that you just printed. Okay, so now I showed you how to record transactions in GL, how to post them, and I also showed you how you can export a batch. Now what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you how to import a batch. So we exported a batch. Now for example, think about it, you're in the month of February and you wanted to import that batch in your GL transaction. Now to import a batch, I'm not going to ask you to import a batch, but if you ever need to do that, or you made a mistake, you can export it and then import it back if you wanted to do that way. So now to import a batch, you always have to be in a new batch. So I'm going to create a new batch. So in batch number 4, now instead of exporting, I'm going to import a batch. Instead of manually record those 3 transactions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click import. And then it's going to ask you the type. So you always have to remember what the file was. It's 2007. And you click browse and you find that batch. So this was the batch. I click on that and I press OK. See, it says 3 inserted. Now I close it. You see that there are 3 transactions that got exported. Now all you have to do is change the date, change the amount, and if you want to change the description, you can do that as well. See how fast is it to record these transactions if you can simply save a batch for a group of transactions that happen on a regular basis. I don't need to record them right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that batch. So I'm going to select this and delete the batch. Okay. Now, but that's what you can do is when you are importing and exporting the batch. Okay, so that's done. Now 2 more things that I have to explain you guys, and that is 1, how to create a recurring entry. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to how to record a recurring transaction. So to record a recurring transaction, you need to go into a GL setup and create recurring entries. So recurring entries are the entries that are done on a periodic basis. Okay, for example, somebody came in and rented a machine from you. Okay, and that one is gonna be rented for 6 months. So what you can do is you can create a recurring entry. So here we can call this. So what are we gonna call this? You can give a name. Let's say monthly, and then here we can say monthly rent, and then you need to pick up a schedule, which is the one that we created before. And if we say that this was a rented for 6 months, I say starting on January 31st, ends on June 30th. Okay, and here we can call this is monthly rental machine, and I will call this a receipt, because this is money that we're going to receive in the bank account every month. And here the entry I'm going to select is debit the bank account for $565, because that's the amount that I'm going to get in my bank account, and credit the sales account for the 200 division for 500, and credit my GST HST payable account for $65. Okay, and then I'll click add. So now the system is going to remember this entry every month. So it's monthly rental, and if you want to put a name of the company saying monthly rental to ABC Rental Inc. Okay, I will save it. So now system will remember this entry and post them until this. And now if during the month, if there's more rental, you keep adding it into the same batch. Okay, so this is how, if I ask you to enter a recurring transaction, you do that using this process. You go into GL setup and save it here. Okay, so you keep doing that every month. Okay, now what happened at the end of the month? Okay, so for example, let's assume that we finish entering all the transactions for the entire month. Okay, so what do you do at the end of the month? So at the end of the month, what you need to do is you need to do 2 things. First, make sure all the batches are posted. So you go into a GL accounts and you look at the accounts. Sorry, you look at the GL transactions, look at the batch, and make sure all the transactions that you have here are posted. You created a batch that was by error, you delete them. Okay, so we finished doing that, and the next thing that you want to do is you want to run the allocation batch, and you also want to run the recurring batches. These are the two things that you have to do once you finish posting all the transactions. The first thing that I'm going to do is the sequence is you first the recurring entries. You go into recurring entries, so you double click on that. Once you do that, we can tell the system to create recurring batches. So what this is going to do is it's going to go back and see what are the entries that were sitting in the recurring transactions and create a batch for you. So we can click process and see there was only picked up one transaction because there was only one, and it has been posted into the batch listing right here. And now you don't need to open it because the system is creating this. If you want, you can double click on that and you see that entry that you created, and it posted that entry right here. Okay, so see this, and if his amount changes, you change it, but usually there's no change, and we simply go in and say ready to post from no to yes, and click post. Now that entry has been posted. And the second thing that you will do is create an allocation batch. So now I'm just going to tell you what the allocation batch is going to do. You remember in chapter 3 we created different allocation accounts. So in that we identify what the allocation account was and then how we wanted to allocate. So what the system is going to do is, if you tell the system to create an allocation batch, it's going to look for all the allocation account, and if there was any amount sitting in those allocation account, it will post them into the appropriate account based on the percentage that you set up. So if I go into my GL account and look at the chart of accounts, so I'm going to show you one account, and then from there you guys will understand what the process is. For example, this telephone expense account. So this account is an allocation account. I must allocate between 30-70% to these accounts. So now you see that there's a 600 account sitting here. And the same thing with the utilities is an allocation account and has to be allocated between these two accounts. So what this allocation batch is going to do is going to take that amount and allocate between the different GL accounts. So how do we do that? You go into a GL transaction and you go into, so you know, GL periodic processing, and tell the system to create allocation batch, and here you're going to say process. All the entries are generated in batch number 6. So I am anticipating 2 transactions. So I go into my GL transaction batch list and come right here. What I see is I see 2 transactions, or 3, because I also have a utilities expense as well. So allocation for telephone 60/20 account, allocation for insurance 60/40, and allocation for 60 utility expenses. So it did everything for you, right? So you don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is process. Once it's processed, ready to post, you say yes and click post. Once the posting is done, you're done entering the transaction. Now if I ask you to print recurring and posting transaction, you go to the same place, GL reports, posting sequence. Now remember, you have to do what this posting sequence number was for these ones were 3 and 4. So I'm going to go into GL reports and I'm going to print posting journals, and I'm going to do, first I'm going to do number 3 only, and 3 was my recurring transaction. So I'm going to print it and I will save PDF, and I'll call this lesson 6 recurring transaction. I'll say posting journal recurring transaction, and I'll do the same thing for sequence number 4, and I will print, and I will click export report PDF, okay, and then I will call this posting journal allocation. Okay, so, and that's pretty much what you guys need to do from this chapter. Okay, after you finish this chapter, I want to make sure that you know how to print the posting journal and also print the trial balance, which you guys have done that previously, so I don't need to go through how to print a trial balance. So you come here, you print the trial balance. Okay, so now you want to make sure your reports are saved. So you click on these reports, save it, on your C drive, and this one and that one. Okay, and then you put it to wherever appropriate folders that you want to save in. Okay, then once you finish it, you want to do a database dump. So I'm not going to go through a database dump. You guys know the process. You create a folder, end of lesson 6, do a database dump, and then do it for OmniDat and OmniSys. Once it's done, you go into the 7-zip, zip that, and download it on your C drive. Okay, so this is the process, and this is how you will complete lesson 6. Okay, lesson 7 and 8, I'm gonna do a quick video separately. That probably be a 5-10 minutes video, but I'll do it separately and record them later on. Okay, thank you everyone for joining, and I'll see you in the next lecture.